Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for holding this important hearing. And to Senator King's last point, well, we have been involved in U.S.-China clean energy initiatives that were helping the Chinese establish better building codes, because I think at that point, 50% of all buildings that were going to get built in the next 10 years were going to be built in China. So if they're not energy efficient, then they are going to be using way more supply than needed. And I want to thank the chair and the ranking member for including language in the energy bills you've been moving through on energy efficiency in buildings. We spend something like $430 billion a year, and it's something like 40% of our total energy use are in buildings. And so while I appreciate the conversation we've been having about consumers and homes, there's this huge opportunity with just buildings writ large, and I think that there are better ways to try to get those retrofits to happen, including some of the language that we have in the legislation that's moving through Congress. So I hope we can push some of those things over the goal line. In fact, I remember the chair coming to Seattle and visiting McKinstry, and it was a great opportunity because we went to one of their control rooms and we were basically watching them monitor energy expenditures in the North Shore school districts, which was way far north from Seattle. But we were watching their energy consumption, and they were basically monitoring it so they could drive down the cost of our school system. So we're big believers in the modernization that we think can happen. We think, I personally believe this is like what we did for automobiles. We need to do for buildings what we did for automobiles, and that is drive that level of efficiency. So on that point, you know, besides the legislation on smart buildings, we've been considering, as you guys look at a global view of this, what other initiatives do you think are spurring this kind of development? A report in the U.S. showed that there's a feedback loop, that this sector of clean energy business retrofitting has proven to their customers that you're just going to get whatever savings, 20% savings, and you're just going to be able to then put that back into your competitiveness as a business in a sector. So they're getting a lot of take up on that. But are there other models that you see around the globe that are working that we should be pursuing on smart buildings?
Thank you, Senator. I agree with the area of your focus. And I would say that one of the opportunities for energy efficiency is it is a global conversation, because all countries are facing very similar issues, the same pressures, and using the kind of same technologies and policy instruments to move things forward. And you know, referring to a couple of comments, I do believe that this systems thinking is really important. The concept of smart buildings, not just about being inefficient in themselves or efficient in themselves, but being part of a whole energy system, helping balance grids, reducing costs on the network, also helping deploy clean energy resources and things like that. So there are new technology opportunities emerging very quickly, and I would urge anyone to think about it in that more systems way. I think the conventional way of thinking about energy efficiency, about the use in that one building or that one appliance, it needs to change, and it's starting to change in different parts of the world. And I do think financing is clearly very important. I would just make one point, which is certainly nobody will upgrade their home without a good financing package, but my suspicion is that most people won't upgrade their home even with a good financing package, because it's not like a car where I get something new in the driveway. It can be invisible stuff in the wall or a changed furnace, which I don't really notice the difference until I get my energy bill a couple of months later. We still need to address how it's marketed and sold, but also the practical challenges. Maybe it's cost neutral for somebody, but they have to move out of their house for a month, or maybe they're getting different advice from different people. So government really has a role in kind of building these markets on both the supply and demand side. When new solutions are being rolled out, people are seeing it in their neighborhoods and they're saying, I want what they have. So that kind of building scale. And that's where I think I would commend the work of this committee and the work of the government here, with a focus on government buildings, in the sense that they can lead by example, because then people can see it working. The supply chain of contractors and specifiers and architects and engineers starts to grow. So that kind of leading by example, I think, is a really important area.
Anyone else?
Yes, completely endorse the systems approach. Thinking about buildings as machines and not just big boxes full of things is really the right way to do it. one thing that's happening, you mentioned building codes, and Washington State's a leader when it comes to building codes. The International Energy Conservation Code's under development right now, and there's a lot of conversation in that context about what the role of buildings will be. Buildings right now maybe they're in a moment of transition. In the future, buildings will become more integrated in the grid. We've talked about sort of systems, and we've talked about how storage will be, but also there are proposals, for instance, to make buildings EV ready. Because in the future, we won't fuel our vehicles at gas stations the same way we do now. We'll fuel them in buildings, whether they're commercial buildings and homes. And so I think thinking ahead to how buildings will be used in the coming decades, with the understanding that the buildings we're building today will be around with us for some time.
I know my time's expired, so I also want to thank the chair for visiting the Bullitt Center, which I think is probably one of the smartest system-built buildings in the world. And Spokane is building an entire block of net zero buildings, so the same kind of system approach. So definitely a lot of upside for business here. So thank you, Madam Chair.